Hey guys, welcome to another SPO Roundtable. I think we should be live now across Twitter or X, YouTube, and we'll give it just a few minutes to get people in. Please do share it out, get your questions into whatever platform you're in. Make sure and add questions in. I find any of these streams or talks that we do, the more community interaction we can get, the better it is, the better the outcome that we can have from it as well, because this is to, for me anyway, this is to learn a bit more about CIP-50, which is one aspect of how Cardano's rewards may change over the next few months or years. I suppose I'm going to learn a lot from this. I hope people watching it will as well. And I'm going to be handing it over to our guests here to introduce themselves, their role in this, and then I'll just be kind of sitting here to learn and try and pull out as much information as I can from these guys who are the experts in this area. So I'll hand it over to, I see Marcus is the first on the left. Marcus, I'll let you introduce yourselves and then we'll work across Ryan, Rich, and Kevin.
Yeah, welcome. Thanks for having me. As you see here, I wear the badge of the Cardano Foundation. This, first of all, for transparency, but then to complete it, I'm also a stake pool operator. Then I'm an elected member of the Technical Steering Committee and the Parameter Committee. So I will try to wear different hats here. And then whenever it comes to a position or an argument, I may just jump in and try to play a little bit an antagonist role. So don't get me wrong. I just try to keep it interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a good aspect to have, is showing both sides of the coin, because we don't want to be the one saying this is where the network should go. We're putting the conversation out there and educating people on both aspects of it, or as much as we can. Ryan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Ryan. I go by Circle Warren on the internet. I'm a Cardano community member and D-Rep. I'm also a member of the Cardano Incentives Working Group that helped author the modernization or rewrite of CIP-50. And I'm really looking forward to this discussion.
Great. Ryan?
Hello, I'm Rich. I'm an SPO and a D-Rep. I'm also part of the SPO Incentives Working Group. And like Ryan said, we're kind of calling it CIP-50 Rebirth. So we're reworking CIP-50 and releasing it. And we're also working on other type of incentive changes from like raising K to lowering min fee and things like that.
Thanks, Rich. And Kevin?
Hi, so I'm Kevin Hammond. I'm chair of the Technical Steering Committee. I've been involved in the incentive scheme since 2019, so I was involved in helping to refine and implement the on-chain incentive scheme. This was done before there were CIPs or any such process. So very important, I think, to revisit what's been done over the last few years. Is everything working? If it's not working, how can we improve it? And obviously, we're here to discuss CIP-50, but I'd like to keep the discussion broader as well, to think about all ways in which the incentive scheme can be improved. What are the irritations? And in particular, who are we doing it for? What are we trying to achieve with the incentive scheme? So leaving you open with some philosophical questions, but what should the incentive scheme be designed to achieve? And are we doing that properly?
Yeah, I think that's a very good aspect. And to go back on that, what we're talking about in the early part of this anyway, maybe we'll get on to other aspects as the conversation flows. We'll just see where it goes. CIP-50 is the starting point, but it is only one aspect of that. And I suppose for people who mightn't be familiar with it, Ryan or Rich, do you guys want one of you to give an introduction to this while I fix my camera? For some reason, it just turned off, but I can still hear you.
Yeah, I can still hear you. Yeah, so so we're not actually the original creators of CIP-50. It was made back in, I think, 2020 or 2022 by Dr. Michael Leisenfeld. At the time, it came bundled with two different ideas as kind of a rework of the A0 parameter, and also this introduction of this new parameter called L that has to do with dynamic pledge leverage, is what we call it. It's a ratio of your pledge to your stake. So our rewrite of CIP-50 kind of gets rid of the A0 part of it and just keeps pledge leverage L. The reason for that is because now we have governance, and we can put forth a governance proposal to change the parameter A0 if we want. So we wanted to have the SIP just the one piece to add in parameter L on its own to see if that passes. And now we can adjust those parameters as the community sees fit to decide on what we want. Generally speaking, how CIP-50 works is there's currently the way the Cardano rewards calculation works. For eligible stake that's eligible for rewards, it uses the lesser of two things. It uses the lesser of your actual stake or the lesser of the global saturation cap. And the global saturation cap is simply the amount of circulating ADA divided by K. And all our change does in this new version of CIP-50 is add a third thing. So instead of the lesser of those two things, it's the lesser of your stake, the lesser of the global saturation cap, or the lesser of the new parameter L times your pledge. And that's really intuitive, and it's a really simple change, right? Because let's say we set L to 100, you can intuitively know, okay, I can have 100 times more stake than I have pledged. So if I've pledged 5K ADA, I can have 500K stake. If I pledge 500K, then I can have 50 million stake. So it's really intuitive, and it's a really simple change that rather than rewriting the existing reward scheme and reinventing the wheel, it rather enhances the existing reward scheme. And that's kind of in a nutshell what our modernization of CIP-50 does. So I can't hear you, Paul. I think you're on mute.
Yep. Thanks, Ryan. For anyone who has questions on that, please do drop them down below, and we will try and include as many questions as we can. Just for myself, so is this a big technical change if we were to go this route, or what would actually have to change on the Cardano blockchain? Is it just a rewards calculation change, or is there a lot more to it?
So it is a big change in the sense that it would require a hard fork. Though I think technically and intuitively, it's actually an incredibly simple change, right? Because like I said, there's already a function in there that uses the lesser of those two parameters. We just simply add a third parameter. And mathematically, that's really simple to solve for. In the code, I think it'd be really simple to add. But it would require a hard fork.
Yeah, so to follow up on what Ryan's saying, it definitely would require a hard fork. The incentives calculation is isolated to part of the ledger code. So it's very, very critical in terms of the operation. In terms of the function, it's a relatively self-contained function. It might be a little more complicated than you're suggesting, Ryan, because you also have to plumb the parameters through the node to the right point. So there's certainly going to be some work in the ledger team to do that. So it's probably not going to be completely trivial, but it's not going to be something as massive as CIP 1694, for example.
Very true. And with the addition of the new parameter L, there'd also have to have all the governance plumbing that has to be done there too, because this new parameter has to be defined in the Constitution. What are the defined limits for the guardrails? How do we change this? So there's quite a bit of plumbing that would have to be done with adding a new parameter like that.
And we'd have to get consensus on an L value as well.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, that was actually a question that I was going to come to, was on the L value. As part of CIP-50, are ye proposing a value on this, or is this something that would be the community decide? You're just proposing this new mechanism should be used, or this new calculation, and then it would be governance to decide that?
Yeah, so CIP-50, the proposal itself doesn't actually define what we want L to be. We really want to leave that up to the community because setting it too high and now it's ineffective at what it does. Setting it too low and it's prohibitive, right? So we really want to get communities' consensus on how strict do we want to be with making pledge leverage a requirement, because we don't want to make it ineffective and we don't want to make it too hard to become a stake pool operator either. So we really want to hit that sweet spot.
And I think we defined it can be anywhere from 1 to 1,000.
Okay, and just what I think from what Ryan said in the beginning is that number would basically be multiplied by the pledge, and that would be the max you could have before you're saturated.
Exactly, and it works just like being oversaturated with K works right now. You could have stake more than that, but only below that line is what's eligible for rewards. So until you add pledge to make it all eligible.
So I was going to say the best way to kick off this debate is to run it through the parameter committee, I would say. And what the parameter committee can do is to evaluate this an initial setting for a parameter such as L, if this is what happens, and then to provide information, make recommendations about what suitable initial settings would be. So I would do that rather than simply going in and saying we think it should be X. That seems to be a more rational way to do things. One of the things that you do have to consider is so one of the things that people do when they deal with technical settings is to consider the parameter setting in isolation. And of course, what we've got to do here is to consider the whole set of economic and network effects from such a change in setting. And potentially it's quite significant in terms of the viability of stake pools. So this is something I don't think we've discussed fully, particularly with the SPO community. But there's a very real possibility with a change like this that some, particularly the smaller stake pools, become unviable simply because they can't raise the amount of pledge that is required. Or what people seem to ignore in terms of commercial operation of a stake pool is that money is not free. And if you don't have enough pledge, what you have to do is you have to go out and borrow it. Now, I haven't tried to borrow pledge myself, but if you're borrowing for a commercial business, you might be paying an interest rate of say 10% on the dollar for any investment income. So you might think, well, actually, there's quite significant cost to raising the pledge, and not all stake pools will be able to do that. Maybe they won't have the credit rating, the credibility to be able to do that. So potentially what happens here is that it creates barriers to entry, as well as perhaps disadvantaging the some of the smaller stake pools. So I think what we've got to do here is figure out what are the benefits, Ryan, to this change. Who is impacted? What's the impact on the groups, on different groups of stake pool operator? And I'm particularly concerned by obviously smaller pool operators who may find it hard to obtain pledge, but also by professional stake pool operators who may find the cost of their business rising as a result of this change in the system. Okay, so why are you doing it, Ryan? What benefit do we get from doing this?
Right.
Well,
so
can I jump in here? Just two thoughts on that real quick. I think what we were just saying earlier kind of dovetails into that. You know, it depends on what you set that L value to, right? We can go really high where it doesn't affect it at all, right? So you can start really high where it doesn't do a lot. Another possible solution that we could look at is that since small pools, well, every pool has to go ahead and deposit 500 ADA to launch a pool to begin with, that could be baked into the calculation to begin with. You can already have so it would be like L plus 500. So you'd get that additional 500 and then times the L value. So initially starting, you'd instantly have your 500 deposit times the L value. And not that 500 has to be moved to your actual pledge. It would just be baked into the calculation that you've already got 500 to start from, because they have had to put out 500 ADA to begin with to start their stake pool. So that's just one possible option that we could do if it's becoming a barrier. I'll let you go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, so one of the things you can do when you're looking at what you want to set L to is you can look at specifically the pools that are already on chain now and figure out who's going to be affected by this value of L. And if you look at the existing stake distribution, you'll notice that overwhelmingly there's a large amount of zero pledge pools. I think there's 473 pools with zero pledge and representing about 2.7 billion ADA in stake. And you'll notice that almost none of those, or very, very few amount of those, are small or single pool operators. They're overwhelmingly centralized exchanges or large organizations who are kind of getting a free lunch out of the Cardano network, right? Like they might not necessarily own any ADA outside of that 500 ADA pool deposit, but here they are controlling multiple fully saturated stake pools in stake and getting rewards based off not owning ADA. And it's interesting because the pledge parameter was originally designed as showing skin in the game, right? You want your stake pool operators to have skin in the game, and it's like you put up pledge and you attract delegation based on skin in the game. And we're seeing that it's not as effective as we want when we have that large amount of stake controlled by zero pledge pools. So we really want to focus with surgical precision on just the problem areas, and we could set L to a parameter that doesn't really affect any of the small pools, but we just get the problem areas fixed.
Yeah, I suspect, Ryan, that what you're targeting are the what we call the proxy operators, the SPOs who are using other people's ADA to fund their pools. Now, it seems to me that these are exactly the operators who could be in a position to raise a pledge if they needed to. So they're not doing it at the moment because they don't need to. But if they were in a position where it was adversely affecting their return, I mean, they would be in a position where they could surely afford to obtain some ADA to put down as pledge. So the reason they don't is because they don't need to, I suspect. So I'm not convinced that this would make any difference to that kind of pool operator.
Right. This is actually one of the biggest questions we've asked ourselves is, why don't these centralized exchanges pledge any ADA, right? Like we have this parameter design that you increase rewards on the ADA. Surely these centralized exchanges can pledge many millions of ADA to get a little bit more reward for their customers. And like you said, it not being a hard requirement might be one of those. Opportunity cost, I think, is another big one, right? Like, why would I put this much ADA in pledge when I can, buy some stable coin and stake it here for a much higher yield? It's really hard to model those things with research tools because there's outside external factors. So I think by introducing a pledge leverage requirement like what we have with L, we could kind of increase the cost to attack. So what we do with part of our research is we measured the cost of a 51% attack in pledge, right? So how much pledge, if I count it from the worst pledge leverage pools, how much pledge do I need to control to pull off a 51% attack? And I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but it was quite low. And that's kind of one of the things that we want to increase here is just increase the cost of attack and the robustness and security of the network.
If I can jump on this thing, so the question for me here is, so it sounds really interesting to have another parameter because apparently, or what we have seen is that pledge was intended to have this effect, but then we noted over the years that it is not really working like it was announced also. So I personally then after I looked at it and concluded that it is somewhere at a sweet spot where it does not more harm than it is useful. And then, but moving it up or down is always, has potentially more damage as a potential outcome than benefit. Now, introducing L maybe allows a combination that makes it more useful in some areas. But this here is then where we really need to also understand. It is important that whoever now looks into this parameter and the value setting, including the designers or the proposers, then the engineers, the reviewers, the researchers, but then actually also DREPs voting on it, that they really need to understand the individual parameter and then the whole context of the whole rewarding scheme, because every parameter and every value therein makes more or less sense in the whole setting. And one thing that I read this morning, and I thought, oh, that's good to see it this morning because it was completely outside of Cardano. It was about Monero and reading a news about a potential attack. So not really attacking the security or the cryptography, but actually buying by incentives the risk or a chance to get a 51% majority. And the conclusion of this little report that presented what is happening there is that this security or the world security and decentralization is not something that we aim to reach, but it is like a moving target. And the moving target, we can try to improve it, but we also always need to look at that we don't open new chances or new vectors to even worse it. So maybe Kevin's question here on this was, if we introduce now something, and for example, pledge was not used so far by players who can easily afford it, then in the first moment, we look too much at the chances of the smaller players so far, and see the chances how they could improve. But if the effects on the not malicious players, but the already very dominant players are even more favorable, then we may make it even worse after we implemented it. So we need to be very careful here. And this is why I wanted to say it is important to understand the very individual function of L, of a new parameter. But then we need to understand how it plays out in the whole setting of the formula.
I just want to bring in the community questions. There's a lot of good points there, and I have questions as well, but I just want to keep up with people who are asking questions to encourage more people to get involved too. There's one from Marcel here. So we'll be limited by K anyway. So with a factor of 100, the max pledge you need to get, yeah, there it is, 75 stake, 750K pledge, and it doesn't make sense to go higher except if you want to earn more rewards. That would be the way that it would work, is it?
Yes, correct. Correct. And this is also, I think, where I would mention that, you also can play with the variable of K, right? So if you have K at 1000, that also changes where your saturation level is going to be. So at 100, so it would still be the same amount, but that would get you a higher amount. So this is where I think L kind of matters, where we can look at different values. So if you're at low at 100, where it may seem where 750 is quite a bit of pledge, right? But your max, if you were at K 1000, you would only need half of that, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I suppose that's the balance. Do we need to keep altering K then if we have L? If L is there and that's going to determine and stop people with a smaller pledge having max saturated pools, does that nullify the need for K, or do you see the two of them working together?
I'll let you take this one, Rich.
I was just going to say the same thing to you. I see them definitely working together. They have a benefit that when combined together, they actually can accomplish more. I'll let you go, Ryan, because I know you've been giving a lot of thought on this one.
Sure. Yeah. So one of the actually the big pushbacks to raising K we've seen over the past couple of years, because there have been many attempts to try and raise K, is like, okay, what happens if we raise K and all the multi-pool operators just double the number of pools they have, right? And that's a perfectly valid question to ask yourselves, right? Because there's no pledge requirement. So as long as you don't have any pledge, you don't need to spread your pledge thinly around multiple pools. There's no reason not to split your pools. So behind the original assumption of pledge was supposed to be that limiting factor, right? So you could run multiple pools as long as you have the pledge to support multiple pools. So by introducing L with CIP-50, now there's this kind of bare minimum threshold where I need to at least have enough pledge to get to the stake level on my second pool before I can actually justify opening a second pool. So now we have this lever that we can control that allows us to continue to raise K without just freely letting pools split, right? So we want to enhance the number of actually unique stake pool operators, not necessarily the total count of pools, because it's a bit unintuitive, right? Because you might think that the more pools we have, the more decentralization we have, but that's actually not true. You want to count unique stake pool operators, which is why this K parameter exists in the way it does. We just need to ensure that pledge is actually a limiting factor for people to split multiple pools. And of course, there's nothing wrong with running multiple pools as long as you have the pledge to support it, right? So we just want to make sure that the pledge is important enough to be a consideration, which it kind of isn't right now.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. And the other question then, Oyster Pool, where's that one gone? Cardano stake pool, even with a high value of L, it would stop pools with 0 or a few ADA pledge from attracting lots of stake. So I suppose that's a positive thing on putting in L, means that there is a reason to have a stake or have skin in the game for SPOs. And I seen Martin also said about that pledge has to count, that it has to count for something, that initially from the beginning, that was the idea that pledge was a factor for SPOs. Let me see, what else have I missed here? Oyster saying, just following on, pledge is meant to stop operators with very little skin in the game from attracting lots of stake. This is not happening. The L parameter can help to fix this. So I think it's like everything. There's a double-edged sword. You don't want to stop new operators who might be in areas that can't raise a decent pledge or much pledge at all to get started. So there has to be setting that L value. And I think Martin had asked about what was a typical L value. I think we touched on that earlier, that right now ye aren't suggesting a value. That will be kind of up for discussion later on.
I think maybe this is a good spot to also mention we did create a tool where people can go in and play with the values. So you can go in there and adjust K, you can put in your own L value, and you can see how it affects the current pools out there, and you can find your pool and see how it affects your pool as well.
Okay, great. So I suppose touched on some of this, but one of the questions I had was, what are the risks or downsides do you see for CIP-50 if it was implemented?
Yeah, I think the hardest part probably is about just getting the community's consensus on L, right? Because if we set it too high, then it's really kind of an ineffective parameter, and we didn't really change much. But then if we set it too low, let's like hypothetically you set it to 1, then you have to have exactly as much stake as you have pledged, which is super restrictive, and only people with huge amounts of ADA would ever be able to run stake pools. So there's a sweet spot there where we want to find, and we really need the community's input on it, is how much pledge do you need to justify the amount of stake that you have. So I think the biggest kind of risk is setting L incorrectly in such a way that it's either not effective or it's too restrictive. And then I guess the other part of it would be trying to get centralized exchanges to play ball, right? Because we already asked ourselves this question. It's like, why are they not pledging ADA to get a little bit more rewards on their customers, customers' ADA? It could be legal reasons. It could be opportunity costs. It's interesting to me because you have other ecosystems that have slashing and bonding periods and withdrawals and stuff, and they'll happily use customer ADA in these things that are a lot more risk to them than our awesome non-custodial liquid staking we have at Cardano. But it kind of begs the question of why they don't pledge. And I think actually, as Kevin said at the beginning, it's very simply because they don't have to, and that's why we're here today pitching CIP-50. Let's make it a bit more of a requirement than it is, and try and increase the security of Cardano.
Yeah, I wonder, is that an education thing as well? Is that they don't realize that if they stake, I'm not actually sure, I'll ask some of ye that might know the number where pledge actually makes a difference, even if it's only a slight difference. I know it's a good few million before the current parameters, but just might be a good point just to talk about how the current system works and how pledge works there. If a pool put up 30 million pledge, then that does give them a slight increase, but I'm not sure the exact numbers or where. I don't know who'd like to take that one.
Sure. Oh, go ahead, Marcus.
Yeah. So as I in the foundation, so the Cardano Foundation organized a review or an incentive review. We can share the URL later. And there is a very interesting chart in where it shows you the pledge benefits depending on your actual pool size. So the answer, Paul, is that you cannot really answer it if you're not looking also on your pool size. So, for example, a small pool can fully pledge, but as it is a small pool, the pledge cannot be more than as the stake size. Let's assume a pool with 1 million size, the maximum it can have is 1 million pledge. And in that range or in that level, or even up to 20, 25 million, a fully pledged pool has not that much of benefit. So it mainly benefits the really large, the already saturated pools. To give you a maximum on this, fully saturated pool at around 75 million, if it does not pledge at all, like zero pledge or 1/8 of pledge, then compared to a fully pledged, being fully pledged, basically a private pool because only the owner itself pledged and saturated the whole pool, gives him a benefit of 30% more rewards than if it would have not pledged. So it is a very significant benefit or commercial economical benefit, but it is not that easy. What can be said here, and maybe it's also, I watched it very interestingly because there was one pool that acted quite in the middle of all of this. So we have many thousand pools who try to have as much as possible pledge, but be it 10K, 100K, or even a million, is not really that much. And the current pledge setting, the value setting, it is not really relevant. So if someone increases his pledge from 10K to even 1 million ADA, the rewards practically don't change. So it is really not, it's more like the coffee you have each day or not. And there are a few pools who can easily and actually have fully or widely, mostly pledged their pools. So these are the full private ones. But as they are set private with 100% margin, nobody really, as a delegator, can benefit or delegate to it because he will not get any rewards at all. So what is very interesting is there was one pool in the last year or 1.5 years. I'm not making names, but it was a very interesting setup because it was a newly created pool, and it was then in the beginning pledged with 35 million. So now what makes it very interesting is that it leaves another 30 million open for delegations. So this is a very rare thing in our ecosystem, because you have a significant pledge benefit and there is room for delegations. And what we have seen in this is that actually in just 5 epochs, so not even a month, the pool was fully saturated. So the pledge actually worked very well here, but it worked very well because it was the only pool offering such a big benefit. So the few delegators who noticed it and whales who jumped on it, because they made really like a plus 15% of rewards compared to literally all other pools, they've quickly saturated it. Evans oversaturated it up to a point where the pledge benefit was eaten up because oversaturated pools earn less rewards. So this was very interesting. And then it was even more interesting watching this pool gradually removing the pledge from 35 million down to 15 million, 10 million, 8 million. And we saw that this was always still enough to keep this delegator. So he was fully saturated, and it worked for everyone that was part of this pool or delegator. It worked very well. Last step, a couple of epochs ago, they removed all the pledge and removed it down to 500 ADA. And not saying my hope, but what I really found interesting to watch on it is this a pool who uses pledge to gain to saturation and then have benefit or just from the saturation size? And when he removes the pledge, he keeps the delegators because it is a saturated pool offering more rewards just from the saturation aspect? Or are the delegators just, let's say, temporary guests who always look for the best pledge offerings, and the moment when someone removes the pledge, they quickly jump away and jump to the next one? So it was the last option. So what we have seen is that after this pool removed the pledge, it started gradually decreasing in size. So it is less than half saturated now, which is still a significant amount, but a significant amount of the stakeable operator itself. So this is not really, so it was interesting to watch, but and especially also I'm even thankful for this pool that he did the whole efforts from pledging first and even then the last step to remove it, so that we can see how theory and research formulas play out in real life. But not really a conclusion that we could say this presents a solution. A last thing is, sorry, I'm very long, but just the last thing. Just recently, there was another pool or a group of pools that has lost pledge on a surprise. And what is very interesting there is, yes, there was also some delegators who already moved away because the pledge lowered their rewards. But if you look at the number of delegators, so this group of pools had like 2,160 delegators, and it already has lost a very significant amount, like 30% or something. What last time I looked on the delegation size, so the total stake was significantly reduced, but it was only minus 60 delegators. So from 2,160, this pool group is down to 2,100. What I wanted to say with this is some very large ADA holders and delegators apparently are interested in pledge and pools who offer best pledge efforts. But a huge amount of small ADA holders, altogether, they also provide a lot of stake, but they don't follow, or apparently don't follow really what happens, and they have not, or may they take much longer to notice that a pool has changed his pledge and it is not offering the rewards at an optimum level anymore. Sorry, this was a longer thing now, so I'll give the mic back to you.
No, that's okay. There's some good insights there. And I suppose it's if someone has a lot of ADA delegated, even that few extra, not a few extra percent in terms of APY, but the few extra percent on top of what they get as standard rewards, that can make a significant difference, or it can be a decent amount of money, especially with markets and the way things can go. So it probably makes sense that you do have people who have more skin in the game themselves. They're looking to completely optimize or get the maximum amount out of it that they can. I have some research to do after this now to try and find them different pools and that out of interest to look at the history of how things go. But anyone joining us in a bit later, we've been talking a lot about CIP-50, which is looking to change the reward mechanisms on Cardano for going forward, whether that's the next, we'll get onto it soon, I think, but whether that's the next few months or the next few years. And it is one aspect of it. There's lots of other ones, and I might come back to Kevin now in a few minutes to ask him about some of the other things that we should be considering on this as well. But if you're joining, please do ask questions wherever you're watching, YouTube, X, wherever that is, and do share it out. The more people we get in watching, the more people we get educated on this, I think the better it is for defining what these levels, parameters might be, as well as the education of the overall Cardano community. But Kevin, coming back to you, what else should we be considering here? So there's a lot of positive support on it. There's a little bit of worry about how you set that level, but what else should we consider in the overall scheme of Cardano rewards?
Yeah, so I wanted to just point out one thing that might not be completely obvious, which is why the A0 has been set relatively low, which is that the rewards pot is fixed and it's divided amongst the stake pools that qualify. So if one stake pool is getting a higher share of the total pot, that means that other pools are getting a smaller share. What you're doing is you're rebiasing the rewards towards those that are playing the game better, if you like. So one of the concerns that we had with the A0 parameter setting it high was that if it was set high, too high, then the rewards would be going to the larger pools and not to the smaller pools. So you can actually exacerbate the inequality between the larger and smaller pools by a high A0 setting. Also, I know you're talking about security. We're obviously very conscious of security. This is not one of the things that historically we've been really that worried about. So Sybil attacks, they're theoretical. I think what we've noticed is that we have enough resilience amongst the variety. We have a very high Nakamoto coefficient compared with other chains, and we haven't noticed that people have tried to make any kind of Sybil attack. We think a Sybil attack would be effectively ineffective in the system as we have it at the moment. Maybe if someone tried, they could get some impact, but then we could still increase the A0 parameter perhaps on a temporary basis to correct that. So we've only ever been once worried that there might be a Sybil attack developing. And this is when we first spun up the incentivized testnet. And when we noticed that happening, we took immediate steps to slow down the possibility of such an attack. And it was clear that, in fact, it wasn't an attack. It was just a large player coming in, getting some skin into the game. So it was actually benign at that point in time. So we need to monitor the system and we need to pay attention to it. But this is not a major real security threat. I believe it's something that was considered, it's part of the incentives mechanism, it's considered there, but I think the real world protections we have they're pretty effective, in fact. So to answer your question, Paul, so I've just digressed for a bit. To answer your question, what else could we do? Well, one thing that I think is very interesting is how do we encourage people to get started in the game? How do people get going in the game? Because realistically, the system is quite weighted against smaller players. The game theory is presumably an open secret. The game theory is designed to be aggressive. It's designed to eliminate stake pools. And the way it eliminates the stake pools is by eliminating those with the least stake. Okay, so it is designed to have that effect. Now, we may not like that, but I think we should have a discussion about that effect, because if we don't like it, what we should try to do is to smooth out some of the effects to make it possible for people to get into the game, which we, I would say personally, I see this as a social good. It helps increase the Nakamoto coefficient. It helps increase the diversity bit of the ecosystem. But then, if we're going to be doing that, we need to make sure that the smaller players can survive economically. They need some way to survive. One of the big problems, I think, is we have this huge cutoff where a pool is producing one or two or fewer blocks every epoch, and particularly those who produce one block every 5 or 10 epochs. Sometimes they get lucky, sometimes they don't. Smoothing out the rewards at that level would help a lot with these smaller players, I think. It would be a more radical change than some of the other things we've been discussing. But I imagine it's a relatively small change to the incentives calculation if we chose to do that. I'm not quite sure how you would do it, right? So huge questions about how if you've got a pool which is slated to achieve one block every 10 epochs, how do you give rewards fairly to that pool? But at the moment, penalizing the pool because it doesn't make that one block, basically it gets 0 rewards for that. So you can essentially be out of the game before you've even started. Or you can get very lucky. You can make your block, you're extremely lucky, you get 2 blocks allocated. And wow, you're a hero, and suddenly your delegation goes up, you get huge rewards, and you're out of the gate. So I would be looking at ways to improve things for the small pool. I would also, as I said, be looking at ways to keep the professional pools in the game. What I mean by professional pools are the players who they're not the super big pools. They're in the mid game. They're hanging in there, but they have possibly quite high operating costs. How do we make sure that we don't cut the incentives to such a level that they can't operate economically as part of Cardano? So I think looking at the economics there, incredibly important. And then the big question, of course, is, well, the incentives are declining. They're declining at there's a half-life of the incentives. We calculated when we first set things up in 2020 that there would be a reduction of, I think, about 30 to 50% over a 5-year period. That was what was calculated. And what we need to do is we need to start to balance that, the monetary expansion, which is ultimately finite in ADA, with some way to increase the fee. So we need to be looking at how do we get the chain usage up? How do we incentivize the fee structure without going to Ethereum rates of gas, etc., because keeping the fees low is part of the Cardano attractiveness. So there's a big problem there, I think. Or sorry, not a big problem, but there's something we've got to consider and we've got to debate before it becomes too late, before we've burnt up all of the reserves or too much of the reserves, and we don't have enough there to keep the system ticking over. So there's a period of opportunity to do that, and we should be focusing on that.
Thanks for that, Kevin. Yeah, there's a few really good points in that. I think I've seen Ryan went to say something at one point, and Marcus has some input on it as well. So I'll leave it over to one of you guys to take it. And then I have a few questions to follow up on that too from things Kevin covered.
Sure. I was just going to say all excellent points by Kevin. Interestingly, we have, I think, 3 different lines of effort outside of CIP-50 to target specifically those things you were talking about. So like one of them is changes to min pool cost or min margin. That'll help small pools that are making 1 block per epoch. It'll help smooth the curve for them. Another one we're working on is tiebreaker changes, because when a height battle or a slot battle occurs, and one of the participants is a small pool, it hurts them much more if they lose that battle than a large pool minting mini blocks. So that's another line of effort. And then you're talking about the sustainability of rewards going forward, the reserves running out. And so we actually have a 3rd SIP coming out for that as well. Specifically with CIP-50, one of the things that we're really trying to zero in on is making it so that we can have a limiting factor, like I mentioned before, for pool splitting, which enables us to raise K. And it's kind of unintuitive to think about, but raising K is actually one of the best ways to enhance the effectiveness of pledge as well. And here's what I mean by that, right? So we're talking about, I think Marcus was talking about before, that you need to have very high amounts of pledge before you really start to benefit from that pledge benefit increase, right? So we call this the pledge benefit zone, right? And it's very roughly around 40 million ADA in pledge, which is very unattainable for most SPOs. And that's about how much you need before you really start to see benefits from pledge. And there's only about 15 pools, I think, that have pledge more than that. And I think they're either all private pools or almost all private pools. So as a delegator, you really don't have much options to benefit from that. So, we call that pledge benefit zone, starts at about 40 million ADA. However, if let's say we double K to 1,000, that actually decreases the zone down to about 20 million, right? Because now the cap is about 37.5 million ADA, and the pledge benefit zone moves down. So now you only need about 20 million ADA to benefit from that pledge benefit zone. And hypothetically, let's say we double K again to 2,000. Now you only need 10 million ADA. So actually raising K is one of the best ways to make pledge viable for small pool operators, because it pushes the pledge benefit zone much deeper into an attainable range for most SPOs. So that's kind of what we're trying to enable with CIP-50 specifically, is just giving us more headroom to raise K without having to deal with the downsides that come with raising K. And then the other lines of effort that I speak about as well, especially like I love what you're talking about, trying to smooth the curve out for small pools. We have at least 2 different things in the pipeline for that, and it's actually on our website if you want to look into those. But yeah, we're trying to very specifically hone in on each of the issues and address them with one issue at a time, so it's very easy for the community to decide, okay, I like this, I don't like this, and then if we come to a vote at some point, then we don't have to vote it as like a whole package of like, oh, I want all these things, but I don't like this one thing. So we really like to split them up and address them one at a time.
Thanks, Ryan. Marcus.
So I was going to say to Ryan, you've been banding around lower ADA pledges, which is great, but pretty clearly 20 million ADA is still a pretty substantial sum.
I agree.
For most people. Is there some way that is some way to assist people with getting access to that kind of sum? You're a D-rep. Can we, for example, lend good SPOs the ADA to help them with their pledge?
No, that's an excellent question. It's kind of a tough question too, right? Because the whole purpose behind the original research for pledge is skin in the game, right? So you really need to own ADA to be exposed to the price action of it, to deter any kind of attacks or negative behaviors, right? And borrowing ADA kind of has the opposite effect of that, right? Borrowing is what you do when you short something. So if I want to borrow ADA, like hypothetical attack here, if I want to borrow ADA and pledge it to a bunch of Sybil pools, and then attack the network, well, now I've also accomplished the outcome of shorting ADA and attacking the network. So I've actually killed 2 birds with 1 stone. By borrowing ADA. So I don't know if there's necessarily a way around it, needing to own ADA to have skin in the game. But we can set it to such a level that it's not too prohibitive for small pools, but also it doesn't allow large operations to kind of get a free lunch too. So
if I can jump on it, so there was a question brought up by Martin Lang in the chat. So and it was mentioned by you before also, this min fee versus min cost discussion. And I want to combine it or give a little bit of a context or history, what happened there. And I want also to combine it with what you just mentioned on the benefit or the return to the hash slot battle resolution, because I have a different opinion on this. But first, the whole goal of this, or the min pool cost that we had for many years on 348 with the lowered block rewards and with also the, let's say, seeing how the network evolves, we discovered, or we have seen this already like more than 2 years ago, that this is going to become a real problem with decreasing rewards. To make it clear here, if your pool barely produces a block per epoch, and these first blocks reward are fully eaten up by the mandatory 348er, then you have a problem, because you don't generate any rewards for your delegators. So how, as a small pool, could you even attract delegations if you don't provide rewards? So as we were not ready with CIP-50 and governance 2 years ago, I had an idea back then in the foundation, and I wanted to come up with this so-called SPO poll. Who remembers SPO poll, not pool, stake pool? And the poll was it was doing a survey along the SPOs without having any governance functionality in place already. It was basically using the Cardano blockchain's metadata functionality to collect a stake-weighted opinion if we should reduce the min pool cost or halve it from in a first step from the 348er down to 178er. That got significant support, and so it also then happened even before CIP-6094 and governance. The thing is, we wanted to keep it very simple and also even make it a learning effect towards governance, so that people recognize that governance is not that easy as it may sound. And I believe more and more people learned it in the last year or this year. But then we didn't want to front run the whole CIP-6094 governance thing. So we did this first step, but then, as you may remember, governance was always just around the corner. So it was announced that it will happen in 2 months, in 3 months, and then again. So it was never that we really wanted to continue to do the next step with reducing it from 170 to 0. This was not because we did not want to do it here at the foundation, but just because we did not want to front run the real governance with the real setting and so on. So this just as a short explanation, and reducing it to 0, it sounds useful, but it would open some other vectors. So there is a proposal to introduce a new min margin or min fee as a replacement. I remember back in the SPO poll times, which is already 2 years ago, I took some epoch snapshots and did a couple of assumptions. So like assuming how many pools would lower or completely remove the min fee, the min fee, and then what would they set, or what would they go as a min margin or as their margin if we will change it that way. So with a lot of assumptions, I concluded that we could even have a min margin of 3% without reducing or without increasing the overall cost from the stake pool rewards that are paid out. That will even allow to have a 3% min margin, so a mandatory margin that every pool must request 3%. If we can completely remove the min fee, so not having it 340, not having it 170, but just 0. There is no min fee. And so this already says that it would allow a lot, but that research or that calculation also turned out that this will come with a huge effect, negative effect on all the small pools, because they, with 3% margin, will get way less than the 170 or 348 before. A last thing that I wanted to say is all of this, so this will go and help what Kevin mentioned before, smoothen out or facilitating or, not simplifying, but basically allowing somehow small pools to grow into larger sizes. Now I want to come to this hash slot battle resolution. I'm against that. So I'm in favor how it is now, because even if we want to support some small pools to grow into larger ones, the simple reality is that we cannot have every pool a large one. So the stake, that the delegated stake, the active stake is limited, and the whole incentive scheme and the reward formula, as Kevin mentioned it before, it is a little bit aggressive. The main goal is to, or the ideal end goal is to achieve K saturated pools. And this slot battle algorithm, like we have it now, is not favoring the smaller ones. Moving it back and favoring smaller ones is quite 180 degrees contradicting the goal to have saturated pools. That's why I'm against it. Of course, it would help. It would also help smaller pools to compete in the beginning. But on the other end, on the saturated pool side, we would also need to understand that it is against the actual main goal. If we look neutrally at the whole network, not at the individual pools, the smaller ones versus the larger ones, then that's it. So personally, I will fully support that idea to completely get rid of the min fee or min pool cost and to replace it by a min margin. Happy to hear your opinions on this.
Yeah, if I could just jump in on the slot battle. Just so everyone kind of understands how it works. So what happens is sometimes there's two pools that are scheduled to mint the same slot. So that's what we call a slot battle. They're scheduled to mint the same block at the same time. And the old rules used to give a slight advantage to small pools on how the tiebreaker was settled. And then it was changed a couple of years ago during a hard fork. And we want to move it back because the issue is that these small pools, like you said, are barely minting blocks, right? They may be minting a block once an epoch or even less, right? So they may be going 5 epochs before they mint a block. And for a small pool to be viable, if you finally get that block minted after 5 epochs or something, and then you lose it in a slot battle, that's just devastating. It's going to ruin a pool. So the thought is that it doesn't guarantee that the small pool will win the slot battle. It just gives them a slight advantage. So we wanted to revert to the old way that it was being done to make more small pools viable. So that's kind of the idea behind it.
I see. Thanks very much for that, for all them points, Marcus, and Rich for clarifying on that too. We're coming up right on the time now, so I want to be respectful of everybody's time. There was one final question there that could be good just to put out. Actually, a comment from Martin saying about by helping newer, smaller pools, you don't want to impact the pools that have been here for years, that are larger pools now, but they're larger because they've been working in the community and been a part of the community. So you don't want to take away from them as well. So it really is a balancing act to try and leave it open that new people can come in easily into the network. That's what we all want, is anybody can come in. But Kevin pointed out as well, it's a competitive nature in it, that people who come in are competing to a degree with who's there to become viable and to push on. But another good question there from Nicholas was, how would introducing the L parameter benefit the average ADA holder delegator? I know we will have a lot of SPOs listening here, but we will have normal ADA holders, and they're wondering, what difference does this make to me? And we'll leave this as the final question then.
I could take it. Yeah. So it's kind of hard to quantify how specifically it would affect like an average ADA holder or delegator. Kind of what you would like to see is you would like to see more viable single pool, small pool operators that are well pledged. And now you would have, I guess, more choices of actual operators that have skin in the game to choose from versus kind of semi-exploitative centralized exchanges and stuff that don't necessarily own any ADA. But as I was saying before, it's kind of a means to an end in the sense that we want to give ourselves headroom to raise K, right? And that's going to, like I said, it'll lower the pledge benefit zone, and maybe some more SPOs can take advantage of the pledge benefit zone now. And now as a delegator, I can delegate to this pool that's getting increased rewards because they have a significant amount of pledge. And that would be great if delegators could take advantage of that, because right now there's only like 14 or 15 pools and they're all private pools. So you as a delegator don't have that option right now. And one other thing that kind of occurred to me on this call is it'd be cool if we continue adjusting L into such a way that maybe eventually you need, let's say hypothetically, you need 1 million ADA pledge to fully saturate a pool. And we've actually increased the pledge benefit zone down so that now at about 1 million ADA, you start to see increased rewards. So now you have like a clean curve of adding to pledge, right? So for the first million, you're increasing your saturation cap. And from that first million onward, now you're increasing your reward ratio. So that would maybe be a cool, like long horizon kind of thing to target for, that we make pledge actually universally viable across the whole spectrum of small pools to large pools. But yeah, more options to the average ADA holder and delegator, I think, is the best way to put that.
Yeah, I think if just when you say that there, it makes sense that if there is an SPO that they want to support, but they're a small SPO and they're worried about not getting rewards if they do, if something like this can help that you can delegate to a smaller SPO and you get the same rewards, then it's a win-win. You can support the smaller pools that you want to. Maybe it's for a cause, maybe it's for certain aspects, and you're not impacting your own bottom line, because that is a factor for lots of people who are delegating. So everybody that tuned in, thank you very much for tuning in. Please do share it out. I think there is probably lots of points in here that anybody watching or rewatching back can learn from it. Do leave questions as well that are here. I will look at the questions and maybe I'll pick them up in some of my own videos to try and put them out there as well. And I'm sure there'll be lots more SPO roundtables. I'll give everyone just a minute to give your closing thoughts on it. And also, Ryan or Rich, you can just say where's the best place for people to follow and keep up with this. And just for myself, thanks very much for watching. Thanks for the invite to come here and host this and learn from it. And Rich, do you want to go first there?
Yeah, thanks for having me. You can go to incentives.solutions, and that's where we have a bunch of our different possible solutions posted, and some of the tools that are there and some of the analysis. So thanks again.
Marcus?
I want to focus my thanks to you, Paul. So as I work in the foundation at the community team, we also work, so my colleagues here work on the backstage for this thing, but backstage is one thing. We always look for hosts that appear here. And thank you very much for coming to the show and host us here with some good questions. It should be actually, this roundtable format should be a format for the community, for everyone who has some topic in the ecosystem. And ideally, it has also changing hosts. So here is also a call to people out there. If you're keen to be a host, to host a topic with some people sitting around a virtual table here, then I think that would be super cool. Please reach out to us.
Thanks, Marcus. Kevin?
Yeah, thank you for organising this. It's been a great discussion, the first of many, I hope, around how we improve the incentive scheme. What I want to leave you with is a comment from one of my colleagues, which is really what we're trying to do here is to create a viable and sustainable network. And what we want is to make the pie bigger so that we can continue to do that. So let's carve up the pie very, very small so nobody benefits. Let's make sure we have a bigger pie.
Yeah, I think actually that's one slight aspect we mightn't have got onto, is how incentives are going to change over the next few years and how there'll be extra opportunities with different layer 2s or different chains or partner chains or whatever comes into Cardano, or different aspects there that can add to the pot, because that's what we want. And even transaction volumes add to the pot. So there's more rewards then to split up with everybody that's out there. Ryan, your closing thoughts?
Yeah, first I want to say thanks to you, Paul, for hosting us, and for Marcus and Kevin for giving us some good counter arguments, and of course Rich for attending and helping us put this whole talk together. I guess my big call to action, right, is for the community, please get involved with this, right? Like, we can't decide on what values of L is good without community consensus. And especially at CIP-50, do you like it? Do you not like it? What don't we like about it? What can we change? And please go to our website, play with the tool we built. I think it's SPO Incentives.forsale.app. Play with the sliders, figure out what works and what doesn't work, and just give us input, and then hopefully we hear from you. So yeah, thanks again, everybody.
Thanks, Ryan. And yeah, thanks to everyone who is behind the scenes making all these changes. It makes my job so much easier when I just sit here and ask a few questions or participate. Everyone watching, once again, thanks for watching. Make sure you like whatever channel you're on here or subscribe to it for future roundtables that are going to be coming out. And we'll talk soon.